either learn from his mistakes that he made year one or keep falling, because he only has this year to prove himself.
There is this year. Yeah. I think he learned. And that's the thing I like about him. So if you said what are the cons, I think he came in too flashy. He should have come in with his mouth shut, like, shit, I'm glad to be here. And, like, I'm going to work my ass off quietly and sort of grind it out. Kind of like Orgeron, right? Like, Orgeron would be a great litmus test for, like, or a great role model in the sense of, like, man, he just kind of, like, he is him. He's authentic. He keeps his mouth shut as far as, like, there's no false bravado shit at Orgeron. There's just truth, right? He's very authentic. And I could follow. He's very servant leadership based as far as that guy is willing to. I hate the idea that all these guys get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think it's stupid. I personally believe in 8 hours of sleep, and so does LeBron James. He believes in 10. That's why he's one of the.
Are you calling me out right now?
You don't sleep for a whole, like, another set of reasons. You just don't sleep. You don't wake up on purpose at 3 when you wish you could sleep till 7. My dad doesn't sleep either. Like, he wakes up. He only sleeps like an hour at a time. He's pulling the Kramer, right? But I think the thing that is really good about Manny is that he was willing to admit Dan Enos and the O-line coach didn't work, and I think he's willing to tweak things. You heard a lot less rings and stupid tackling, and there was a lot less, like, midnight hype madness. Like, none of that, like, NBA Jam garbage was going on anymore. I think he was like, oh, now it's business. Now we're back to business. Even in the transfer portal, he went after getting guys that weren't kicked out of somewhere else. They were graduating. They were academically excellent, right? And they were guys with good character. I've never heard – I'll tell you, Georgia Tech coaches wanted the defensive end to go there. He just chose Miami. They wanted him. So it's not like his old coaches didn't want him. That you can't say the same thing about the kid from Virginia Tech, right? And it's not, King, they didn't want him out of there. He wanted out of there. And a lot of people wanted him. It might be, I don't believe in luck, but timing and preparation. But you're blessed to have him show up, right? So I think he's done a lot.
I actually haven't thought of that. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, I'm just saying. I think that's, to me, that is where things have changed, and he's making. Martell had a bad reputation. I think he's made changes. His entire. He was looking at talent, and talent doesn't always make best. That's straight out of the program. They're going to be, copyright infringing me left and right. But, I think talent doesn't always make the best. That, a friend of mine that's in coaching, used to always use the wins above replacement. If you're a headache, right, aren't you even worth the damn win? And so was the Trayvon Hill kid, if he was a headache for Miami and for Virginia Tech, was he worth any wins with 2 or 3 sacks? Hell no. That ain't worth it. Like, shit, you could put anybody in there and do that. Hell, Rudy got a sack, right? Anybody can sort of pull, allegedly. I guess that might not be true. I have no idea. I can't remember. But, allegedly. But hell, they stuck the damn, that jabroni linebacker was in and he made a tackle, right? Like, I mean, almost anybody can get ran over once, right? I dropped a home run one time. My dad said the ball caught you. You didn't catch the ball. Anybody can, have the ball catch them every once in a while, right? Yeah. I think the things that he's done that I have my positives to are replacing out, just getting rid of the guys that didn't work out with you, right? Like, I'm going to bring in a new OC. I promised you something I didn't deliver on. Now I'm going to deliver, right? They got an offensive line coach that is a college offensive line coach, which is very different from NFL. And they brought in a new receivers coach to work the air raid because it's totally different than timing patterns, right? It's all option choice routes. So I think it was a good things to see. And I think seeing someone grow after 12 months is a really positive thing to note about them, that they are willing to grow, change, and accept responsibility. One of the worst things I heard from Randy Shannon when I was watching the games from 2009 was at halftime he blamed Mark Whipple. Buddy, that's your fault. God. Anything Mark Whipple does is your fault. You hired his ass. So that's you. It's your fault. It all works top down. And so if you're not willing to accept all of the blame and give out all of the praise and just go, thank God that he was here. God, I loved him. Then you're not a real leader. And that's why you're the defensive coordinator at UCF.
Yeah. We had if you know Better Duck on Twitter, I mean we've had him on a bunch. The first time we had him on, he compared Manny to Butch's early career. And we asked him about what was going on. He's like, well, we already saw this. I mean, you talked about how horrible that '95 team was under Butch. He said Butch had to learn on the job. Like he was kind of Duck's not his exact words, but he makes it sound like he thought Butch was a pretty bad coach at first, but he had to learn these things. And honestly, that's kind of the thing keeping me in on Manny is what you just talked about, is the ability to self-assess, realize what you've done wrong, the mistakes that you're making, and then correct them and not make the mistake again. And for all the reasons you brought up, that's kind of what's keeping me optimistic. I've talked a lot about it on this pod. Last year it was all style, no substance. Even the hires, right? It was the style points for stealing a guy from Bama, air quotes. It was the hype from getting QB1 off the reality TV show, and no disrespect to Tate because I like him.
Yeah, watch what you say, bro.
I'm a huge Tate fan. But, there is a difference in Tate and De'Eric in that, Tate, there's a lot of hype around Tate. And if you watch his high school tape, there's good reason. Like, he was an electric athlete in high school. But De'Eric King has been an electric athlete on the college level. And so we know that he's capable of doing that because he's produced. And Rhett Lashley, he just put up the 7th best offense in college football. So he's produced now. It's not about style anymore. It's about substance. I mean, the substance is what gives you style, right? We talk about these old Canes. Sorry, I'm ranting here, but we talk.
Go ahead.
We talked about these old Canes teams where we're making big plays, running into the tunnel, dancing, getting penalty flags thrown for taunting and unsportsmanlike conduct. But that doesn't work if we're losing. It only works because we're showboating at how bad we just kicked your teeth in. It's the substance that creates the style. It's and I'm hoping that Manny learned that. Like you said, he was all style, no substance last year. Hopefully it's style before substance now, or substance before style. So
what you said about the '95 season. So the funny thing about Butch Davis is, I don't think he adapted anywhere near as much in 5 years as Manny's done in 1. And we'll see if it, really comes to fruition if we have a season and everything. But, I think with Butch, it just became Jimmy's and Joe's outweighed their X's and O's, right? I mean, if you watch some of the stuff that they do, is they're getting gashed by the Jabbar kid, or even, even with Syracuse was kind of tearing them apart for a half. They didn't make a lot of adjustments. Some of those guys just started playing a little better, and it was hard for Syracuse to handle Daniel Ferguson, who is a family friend from many years ago. I haven't talked to him in years, but when I still lived down there, so 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, he was a family friend. My dad and his mom used to work together in the Orange Bowl a lot. So, I think he adapted it a little bit. Like if you were watching the game against Syracuse, they ran power a lot less, and they're running stuff like stretch and letting him cut back because he was really a zone back, letting him run inside zone and stretch more. But, they're still doing a lot of the same shit. It's just Ryan Clement was better than Ryan Collins. And I think even with the offensive line, like Casey Jones and guys getting injured, when you watch it, you're like, yeah, but you let – the thing that I like about the zone, this is a total tangent, but the thing I like about the zone is that you just have to stalemate blocks. Watch Clemson. You don't watch Clemson dominate blocks. Even when they double team someone to run duo, they just stalemate, and the back squirts through and just cuts off a guy and gets 8 yards. But they don't have a dominant offensive line. Their offensive linemen don't make it in the NFL. They don't dominate. They just do enough. They stalemate blocks. So anyway, with a bad offensive line, you can run zone, and you can sort of just kind of hold on to your guy and let the back do his work. That's his damn job. You brought him in here to do his job. So you could see that they changed a little bit. But, I thought with Butch Davis, his number one thing was wanting to run the Cowboys offense when you don't have Irvin, Novacek, Johnston,
you don't have that offensive
Smith,
line.
and Aikman. and Nate Newton and those guys, Wisniewski and Newton. You don't have one of the greatest compiled teams. Yeah, and the Cowboys, Jimmy Johnson, that was the bet. He was the smartest guy in many ways, but in that way of saying, wow, there's no salary cap. There's all these draft picks, and they dumped Walker and got even more. I know all of these college football. I wrote a thing about why Johnson's drafts were so successful at first many years ago, trying to sell it, and it didn't really work out so well for me. I think I got $50 for it. But, how, like, I did a deep dive into it. Miami was playing a national schedule. And, Jimmy Johnson was able to play Auburn, UCLA, LSU, Michigan, Notre Dame, Florida, Florida State, BYU. They were booking at least, if not playing, all of these teams all over the damn country, right? Penn State, they were getting everybody. And so in order, in Oklahoma, whenever you get everybody like that, you also see their opponent tape. So he was seeing a national schedule versus, let's say, you are an ACC coach. You're only getting the same teams over and over again. Being independent, playing a national schedule, they were actually seeing hundreds and hundreds of kids who wound up going on to the NFL, giving him this massive draft advantage, not to mention the free agency and salary cap weren't things yet when they first started that run. And so you've got all the guys you want. You could trade and stuff. You could cut people. And you could also draft. And the Walker deal was great. But a lot of it came from that national schedule and coming right from college and knowing who the best players. I mean, think about it. He had coached against Emmitt Smith. Brought it, he's there. He had coached against Aikman. So a lot of that came from that. That's a total, tangent. But Butch Davis wanted to run that offense without all those legends that we just talked about, without umpteen Hall of Famers, or at least guys that belong in the Hall of Fame, like a Darryl Johnson, who's, I don't know if he is or isn't, but he's vastly underrated if he's not. They're able to do that. And then you look at the roster at Miami, and you're like, well, the line wasn't terrible. It just wasn't great. That's a Dennis Erickson thing. They weren't recruiting line at all. But mixed in with that, are you really running the right scheme, as we talked about Dan Enos, to offset that? And so Butch and Enos almost seemed very similar, strange but true, when I'm watching that and thinking, God, we're just square peg round hole in this thing. Daniel Ferguson's his own back. You're trying to run power. That UCLA game was very telling. And then he had bad clock management. They wasted timeouts all the time and stupid shit. But, a lot of it was, and to me, that's the sign of a good head coach. Penalties, clock management, and are you forcing things in because that's what you want to be right? Or are you doing things that actually do make you right?
Okay. Okay. That was a good point. Well, Justin, let me ask you two more questions before we get you the hell out of here. First one, give me one thing you love about D'Eriq King and one thing you're skeptical about his game.
Yeah, there's a whole lot to love as far as when you are looking at an offensive line like that and somebody that can, that can move the pocket. He's going to be able to scramble, which is a huge part of the game now, that I think if anyone looks and says, the protection broke down, he had to run outside and he threw it downfield. That's everybody. Watch Burrow, watch Trevor Lawrence, even Tua, who obviously has bad ankles and a bad hip. Look at Mahomes, look at what Tom Brady did for a long time, Joe Montana for a long time, Steve Young. I mean, you can go all the way back. And you can go all the way back forward to, back to Steve Young and Montana and those guys and, and then go back the other way and say, I like the fact that somebody can move around and make things happen and create plays. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He scores a lot of different ways. The only thing you might not like about him is he isn't very tall, but it didn't stop Kyler Murray. It didn't stop Baker Mayfield. There are other Drew Brees. He's a Super Bowl winner at 5'9", so it's not stopping a ton of guys. Now, does Drew Brees have an unbelievable amount of talent? Sure, but I think King has unbelievable amount of talent as well. So I mean, maybe something you complain about is the level that he played at. Did he play at the highest level? No, but it's Houston. It's not like it's they're more like to me they're more of a ACC than they're not. I think Houston could jump into